For the next talk, we're going to have Ola, or let me try and say her surname properly, Zaborowska.
Very well.
Wow. Okay, Aleksandra Zaborowska. She's going to present us sustainable food systems in the EU legal framework. Go.
Hi everyone, I forgot to put my name on my presentation.
Good, we cannot claim it's our presentation.
So although my presentation talk about EU legal framework, meaning in my title, this is not what I only focus on. Why? Because the food systems in general, it's not something they can put a border on, right? It's not something that you have a restricted area of the EU. That means that this is where the food system finishes. It doesn't. It's a world one. And of course, when it comes to the legality of it and all the new initiatives, we can, being where we are, focus on the European legislation. But again, when we talk about food systems, I don't think we can only focus on the EU area. So as you see here, I put here just a small graph that I don't know if you know that lady, an Australian who used to study like sustainable development, but she's also a graphic designer, an illustrator, and she does amazing things about complexity of the world we live in, especially in terms of food, agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and yeah. So this, I know that you cannot see distinctively, but it just shows how a fragile food system looks like, the processing, the shipping, everything that we talked about in the presentation of Theo, and how we can make it better and make the food system more resilient, which is a privileged position we're talking from, because not everyone is able to take care of their own garden. Not everyone has the space to do it. We live in urban areas. Not everyone is also conscious on how to do it. So in a perfect world, everyone would be able to participate in community gardens if they don't have access to their own piece of land, or they don't have a balcony where they can grow things. But I hope in the future, I mean, also the legislation that we're introducing will help with that. And now I don't know how it works.
So you have to point at the computer.
Roll, just roll.
Roll. I'm rolling.
Yeah, you need to put it on the table first, so connect.
Połóż na nodze i...
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if
Okay,
you,
it's working.
you can take it off now.
Great. Yeah, that's good. Okay, oh sorry, there's a small spelling mistake. What is a stable food system? This is just a very simple explanation of what a sustainable food system is according to FAO, to the UN Food Organization. A sustainable food system delivers food security and nutrition for all in such a way that the economic, social, and environmental basis to generate food security and nutrition for future generations are not compromised. A sustainable food system should thus ensure and contribute to all elements of environmental, social, and economic sustainability. So there is something that we... So it's something that for a long time, so this one was coined in 2014. It's quite inclusive. So the problem of like the difference between the food systems and sustainable food systems, of course, is that we think about future generations. We don't focus on what we're growing now, but if we will be able to grow food, let's say in 50 years. And food as culture. So this is a little bit going off the topic of EU legal framework, but just to make it more interesting for you, there is a very good book that I really recommend to everyone who's interested in food, and I think that everyone should be interested in food because we all consume it. We all think about our health, but we also think about the environment, and we should just focus more on actually what we put on our tables and what we eat. So it's Carlin Steele showed a book before A Hungry Nation, and now Utopia, How Food Could Save the Planet. And she also wrote a book on how to feed the hungry city. And today we live in a global village in which Google is the marketplace, Amazon the general store, Facebook the garden fence, and Twitter the local gossip. And I honestly don't want to live in this kind of a world. I don't want to know what about you. I would like to know what I'm eating, and I want my food to come from a place closer to me. And I wanted to show you something when I say about food is culture, because when we talk about food systems, it's not only the legislation, it's not only the transportation, it's not only how we grow food, but also what is food for us. Food is like a part of our culture. And when we deprive people from learning and remembering, for example, how you grow food and how you produce it, how important it is for your local culture, you lose connection with nature, which is what we talk about in general, we all talk about in our NGO and in NeuroLandscape on different levels. And when we lose that connection, we become unhealthy, both mentally and physically. We don't have access to good food, but we also forget about all those traditions that were like associated with the place we come from. So there is a movie called Gather, talking about the Native Americans and how they lost the connection to their land, to the food that they used to grow traditionally, and how they're trying to restore it. And I really recommend that movie. I'll just show you a clip that it's legal to put, and also you can also do like open screenings of that movie. It's for people to show it at schools, etc. For young people also to see how food is important.
Our ancestors saw the world end once. That whole life was gone. Now we're on the other side of the apocalypse.
The different wrongs that have been done to native peoples are just so sickening.
I mean, they even had slogans like kill the Indian, save the man. That's genocide.
Millions of people all across the Americas systematically wiped out, starting here on the East Coast. That's the reason that we don't have that relationship with some of those traditional foods anymore. What's popping? I see onions.
Yeah, we have red onions, yellow onions,
You ready?
We're salmon people. But what do we do if our salmon don't come back? What I've come to understand is if we want to maintain our culture, then we have to have buffalo as a vital part of our communities.
What we're doing is reintroducing our young people to the land, the food, and our traditional ways of healing.
Working at the farm has brought a lot of healing to my life.
I've been clean 16 years, June now. I learned to heal through harvesting our traditional food.
We're celebrating Apache foodways in a kitchen that was built by Apaches for Apaches.
It's this movement among all indigenous people that they're fighting, they're listening, and it's like music. When you hear the drum, it's calling you, and it's Mother Earth. The Mother Earth's heart's beating, and she's talking to all of us that we need to do something. Before they was born into the sea.
So why did I put it? Although you could tell that it's a little bit like off-road from the topic of the legal framework of food systems, is because we need to legislate better to be able to restore that. Is it in the EU? Is it outside of the EU? Thank you. Okay. Now, to the basics. Agriculture in the EU. What's important? Why do we legislate it? Because agriculture is an almost exclusive EU competence, which means we only where the country wants to step in to legislate, they do. But in general, the main competence lies in the EU. That's why it's a good thing, because then we can treat the agricultural system as a whole, and we can legislate on a higher level, which makes the policies more coherent. Because the problem right now, for a long time, was that the legislations depending on a country, we're so diverse that even with the Common Agriculture Policy that is actually, we're celebrating the 60th anniversary this month, which we have a lot to celebrate for, but still there's a lot to be done. As a lot of people are saying that the cups of the Common Agriculture Policy is not enough, and it's not pushing enough the system to change and to become more sustainable. So what we have here, we have CAP, which is Common Agriculture Policy, and CFP, which is the Common Fishery Policy. We have also, of course, and now, since we're talking about sustainable systems, we want also the environment conservation policies, we want health and food safety, research and innovation, so something that we also would like to be a part of, environment and, a single market and competition, so how we sell this food, trade and development policies, and development, because when it comes to a lot of programs of humanitarian aid of the EU, also food, of course, in hunger and alleviating hunger is part of those. And also food is a big part of, I would say, security, which I did not put here. They officially don't really write about it, but I mean, development policies, they come very often as a consequence of a conflict, and it's in conflict-zoned areas. That means food, water is also part of the conflict, and very often actually it's a trigger for that. So all those policies, I mean, cover the production, the processing, the distribution of food, the consumption of food, why we eat it, is it healthy, is it not healthy, impact all of those mentioned processes, but also other policies, because people get sick, not only from what they eat, what kind of pesticides or fertilizers are being used, but also because of the greenhouse gas emissions. And for now, the data, the current data say in between 21% to 37% of greenhouse gas emissions in the EU is caused by food production within the EU. And why this difference in numbers is because it depends on the country. Mostly. There are countries, also there are huge discrepancies in between the new member states of the EU and the old member states of the EU, which is actually not always the case that the new countries, so I would say the less rich ones, that does not mean that they actually have less sustainable agriculture. Very often the opposite, because of the traditional knowledge as well of growing food. Countries like Romania, countries like Poland, actually, they have quite good, not sustainable, but getting their agriculture. The new CAP, there's a 60th anniversary of the first Common Agriculture Policy in May this year. And also because of that, during the past 2 years, the new EU initiatives came up. We've been also talking about them a little bit in our grant proposal, which is the Farm to Fork strategy, Green Deal as a bigger file, that there is a lot of initiatives within the Green Deal, and also there is a big part on food. Not enough though, if you ask me. Fit for 55 climate package. It targets reducing gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. Within the climate package, of course, there is also a chapter on food, and as I showed you before the data, the 21% to 37% of gas emissions comes from the food production, so unsustainable agricultural practices. And the biodiversity strategy for 2030, which is, as you know, it's very important part of how we're not taking care of our biodiversity right now with unsustainable food practices.
Yes. So just to clarify, when you're talking agriculture, do you include farming in it as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
What is this Fit for 55?
Yeah, Fit for 55. Those are the proposals. It's a package that have been proposed in 2021. Yes, 2021. It's been a work of where you have from different sectors, let's say, you have proposals of new legislation that should be introduced to meet the targets until 2050 of greenhouse emissions. So from every possible sector where there is any kind of connection to how you can alleviate and how can you stop the development of like of climate change and the emissions, this is where it comes. So proposal, so it's basically like a lot of layers of different proposals for different legislations in different sectors, but a common goal is to like stop the climate change.
Yeah, for example, thanks to that, we will all be flying much less. The flights will make much more, like much less flights will be possible.
Exactly.
It will be much more expensive to fly. It will be much more expensive to purchase batteries. It will be, each battery will be tracked and has a own passport, battery passport, I think. And there is like a lot of things that will make our lives less comfortable, less convenient. But climate change will be delayed or mitigated.
Yeah, let's say mitigated, exactly, yes. But the thing, so that's why you would see it's not, you see that's why it's so many sectors, as she's saying. It's batteries, it's like transport, so it will be like some new legislation when it comes to aviation, to the ETS, so like, so all the special, I mean, giving points for like how good something is for climate. Is it like aviation,
you
so like
your credits, how many credits you already used this year? You can't
maybe next time I could invite my husband, who actually works in the industry. So
and when will this start?
He works in an industry, and industry is one of the...
They have to already complete it, so it will be quite...
The legislation will be coming like, so it depends, so it starts, you get the proposal from the Commission, how the legislative process works, then it comes to the European Parliament, it's discussed in the committee, like the committee that is responsible, for example, when it comes to aviation, so the transport committee has to work on a file, then there is a special trialogue, so their council and the commission and European Parliament meet and they work on compromises where they work on this legislation, piece of legislation, then it's voted, then when it goes through with some amendments, changes, it goes to the council, and you go to the council, and this is where the countries have to vote it, and then it can be implemented. It has to be implemented into the national legal framework.
Yeah. If you want to translate from this political speak legislation to normal human,
yes. It's true that the language of the EU is quite specific, and it takes some time to understand it. You need to like translate it into like another normal language.
Literacy, right?
Yes.
Another literacy, yeah.
But it's not necessarily a good thing, meaning there's a lot of transportation over the sea, and you use a lot of gas.
Of course.
So what that will happen?
Oh, for sure, the shipment. But there's also new legislation coming in already on changing also like the shipping industry and.
Just increase the prices because people will be starving.
Yeah, so she just gave examples of like final users, right? Like normal public.
But it also will affect, of course, the companies. It's not like only the last person in the whole chain will suffer. The companies will have to adjust, right? And they don't have a lot of time to adjust, you know.
So it's going to get delayed because
probably the target won't be met. Right on time. That's just a tentative.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to, just to go back to Farm to Fork strategy, I just wanted to give you some numbers, like what actually the Farm to Fork strategy stands for. And I mean, you understand Farm to Fork strategy, of course, you want to shorten the supply chain, but that's not only it. It's also to reduce by 50% the use and risk of chemical pesticides by 2030, which is terrifying that we use so many. Reduce by 50% the use of more hazardous pesticides by 2030. Bon appetit. The excessive, when it comes to the nutrients and nutrients density of food that we consume, reduce nutrient losses by at least 50% while ensuring that no deterioration on soil fertility. What I want to know, no deterioration, I would like to get it more rich, so I think this is not enough to talk about no deterioration. Reduce fertilizer use by at least 20% by 2030. and also an important thing, so antimicrobial resistance. Linked to use of antimicrobials in animal and human health leads to an estimated 33,000 human deaths in the EU each year. The Commission will reduce by 50% the sales of antimicrobials for farmed animals and in aquaculture by 2030. And organic farming. This is actually something that we came across when we were preparing our proposal. So organic farming, the Commission will boost the development of the organic farming area with the aim to achieve 25% of total farmland under organic farming by 2030, which is not a lot, is it? 25%
no.
By 2030 to be on organic crops.
So, yeah, so because I mean all those like changes, projected changes, I mean those goals, like they could be covered by just increasing like the share of the organic sector. Like it's just enough to, you know what I mean? So I'm wondering whether that's going to be what's going to happen, and then you can have like a two-tier kind of like food system, or whether those goals will be also applied to more general kind of like food production. You know what I mean?
I think, yeah, I know. No, I would say more general. Okay. I would say more general because
it will not be like, okay, so we reduced the amount of microbes and the fertilizers and pesticides and all that because we genetically modified everything.
Like for example,
yes, she's there.
If you look at the packaging, for example, because this is also an important part what you were talking about, is because there's also this new labeling that will come into force that is already in some countries. I'm not writing about here, but so I don't know. For example, I know that it got introduced in Poland as well, but on the national level, it's in Belgium already. It's been a couple of years that you put those. In France, I think it's there as well. So you put on the packaging, for example, that this food is marked A, B, C, D, or E. So how good it is for you and for the environment. The problem is this scale is absolutely outdated. They're working on a new one because and also it's very politically corrected. So all the meats, for example, they will show E. Most of the meats, the cheese mostly show E. And when you and fruit and vegetables most of them are A. Any processed food in general, of course, goes lower. But for example, the processed food of like all those soya products, like this Beyond Burgers,
plant-based.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is even what Farm to Fork strategy says, that in order to achieve those targets, we actually should focus and go towards a more plant-based diet, which, as we know, is
So fake meat can be A, and
exactly,
burger
and beef, even when it's like grass-fed and grass-finished, it will be still maybe not E. I don't know how it will be marked, because when you buy it somewhere, the like farmer's market, you don't know what's only when you go to the supermarket you see the labeling. Then it shows that I would say it's probably D. And the thing is, as we know, as we need to look at the agriculture as the whole system, right? So like when you talk about going organic. Yes, but organic not always means that the practices are sustainable. There is a difference between growing organic food and regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is an agriculture where you take care of the soil and there's no monocropping, for example, and no tile in most parts. So, for example, in Spain, in south of Spain, you have huge lands of like monocropping, for example, tomatoes that are called organic, and you're gonna go to your store and I don't know, I'll go in Brussels and I'll buy packaged, I'm not gonna buy them, but let's say I go and I buy packaged tomatoes in the supermarket marked A, and they have a certification that they're organic, but they actually come from like very high water consuming monocropping area, but they do have the certification because the pesticides, most of the pesticides that are on the list, they were not used, only the unbanned one, because in organic agriculture still there are some pesticides that still can be used, that they're on the list as not forbidden ones. So you know what I mean? Regenerative agriculture and organic, it's not in one. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and also when we talked about the GMO, like in the US, if you look at the packaging, most of them they say, right, non-GMO, non-GMO. And in EU, they started doing it, for example, on eggs, that they put the non-GMO, but if you say, yeah, it's banned to use any GMO-related feeding for chickens in the EU, so it has to be a non-GMO. They don't have to put it on the package.
It's like silly. It's like putting gluten-free sticker on water.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly. So the same with this label.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the factors in the unsustainability of European food systems. So, of course, climate, how it affects the biodiversity, the soils, the richness of the soil, the water and air quality, the greenhouse gas emissions, the animal welfare, so going towards the cage-free farming, of course health, diet-related diseases, and also production system health issues. So what we talked about, like all the respiratory system problems, like again coming from the greenhouse gas emissions. And what I really care about, which is the socioeconomic structural problems, which is like still the legislation that we have still keeps in power those huge large businesses in comparison to small SMEs who, for example, would like to farm regeneratively. And the environment cost of production, not internalized enterprises or decision making, high cost of healthy food, lack of consumer awareness about sustainable food. Yes. Because again, sustainable, organic does not always mean sustainable.
Sustainable, we don't know.
Yeah. Exactly. The limitations of the current system, structural factors to overcome, such as relatively higher cost per calorie of healthier foods, again, and the profitability of producing food to current standards. Also, the whole marketing system. For some commercial reasons, companies invest more money into researching, developing, and marketing unhealthy foods. And question for you: what kind of limitations would you be able to find yourself of the current food system?
For organic.
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly show how food is important is this connection that I'm really interested in, which is like the food systems and its connection to conflict and how it kind of interconnects the hunger and conflict. So the newest data, I mean the war in Ukraine, it's been how many, 1.5 months, almost 2 months. So we're already getting the data. So what happened recently, actually, the Ukrainian government, they recently banned exports of locally produced food, including wheat, barley, and sunflower. And so as a result, Ukraine probably will become a net consumer of those. So also the planting season takes place despite the conflict. But it's likely that the production will only be destined to cover the domestic needs. Meaning that all the countries that used to rely on those and to be imported, they're not gonna get it. And the countries like Lebanon, Yemen, when you already have huge hunger crisis, impacts on the MENA countries, so the Middle Eastern countries, 50% total wheat supply coming from Ukraine. And as you know, wheat is not only, oh, let's make bread, wheat is also for animals. That means no food for the animals. It's gonna be, so the humanitarian crisis that we see right now, that started way beyond the war in Ukraine. So the spillover of the food system crisis in Ukraine and the stop of import gonna have a huge effect worldly. And so what happens, as I wrote here, I made an assumption, impact on security and stability within the EU. We have to remember that we have a lot of programs in our development policy and development aid EU has, where we count on those programs to kind of first alleviate the conflict that can arise around food poverty, energy poverty, etc., water crisis in those countries, so that we actually, for example, don't get even more refugees within the EU. And when we don't have this food, for example, we already see in Lebanon, we've been starting seeing the past month some protests against the poverty, that there is not enough food, there's not enough water, and there's also problems with energy. Also coming from the war in Ukraine, meaning that it's starting to look like the 2011 Arab Spring. And we don't know in a couple of months how it's going to develop. So you see how the food impacts all those other areas.
So there's not an option for them to cultivate locally, meaning it's...
No, that's the problem, that their soil is so depleted and there is not enough water, especially the water scarcity is the problem. So no, they're not able to. They would if they could. Also because it was a conflict zone and stuff, so like for example, some farmers were actually, for example in Syria, I mean, most people just been forced first to like change the location because of the conflict. So they had to leave their farms. So there are like no farmers to actually do to plant the food. First, second, huge water crisis. Third, a lot of people died in war because all the men who were working on the farms, they either were forced to fight or they were displaced. So there's a climate change. So in those countries, especially that are already they already were in need of humanitarian aid. They suffering also the climate change the most. They have no water. So there's a lot of layers into that, so that this food actually cannot be grown in those countries. Yeah. So, I mean, I know that we don't have a lot of time, but like, if you would like to answer any of those questions, or maybe just like we choose one to just talk about. Actually, something. Do you think? Yeah, maybe you want to choose.
Number 4.
Okay. Do you think the so-called food giants can actually change the way they produce and source their products, or if it's just greenwashing? So like Nestle, for example, introducing all those new fair trade, for example, sustainable growing cocoa, like having all those connections with farmers, like in Brazil, etc. Do you think it's?
I think it won't change if it's not bringing them return of investment.
What if it does? Because I mean, there's a lot of data already saying that regenerative agriculture actually can be profitable. Because that's the point.
So then it can change. I think then it can change.
Actually, I think I answered that. The organic trade, which not exactly the same, but it usually goes together with fair trade, is constantly gaining growth and higher growth than the non-organic, the non-fair trade. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but yes, they will level up. The one will not overcome the other one. That's obvious because we have a too much population. You cannot feed everyone with organic and fair trade.
Not at once, but maybe in years, in decades, I would say. In decades.
If the population drops to 4 billion, perhaps.
Yeah.
Not if we think with the same population we have right now, you cannot do it. It's not sustainable for other reasons. But they will level up. So yes, it can actually happen. It will take time because everything is driven with money. My agrofair, for example, it is only fair trade, it is only organic. So, and they are profitable. They are one of the biggest in organic. But if you compare them, for example, with the, how is it called, Dole, it's the one. If you compare them with Dole, their year income is not a day's income. But still they're one of the biggest in organic banana.
Yes, I buy them.
Okay, Dole will always exist and Dole will never become fair or organic.
Yeah.
But the others will take part of the market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's my answer to number 4.
Okay.
What's the number 2 answer?
What do you think are the reasons for the prices of local organic products being objectively high, and what policy solutions would you propose to make it accessible for everyone? Well, I think you wanna guess?
Grow your own food.
I think
but it's not possible for everyone.
It's okay. So organic farming, basically, it doesn't produce as much per square kilometer, let's say, or square meter. So it's less, it's not as intensive. there is higher risk of having a, not having crop because you're not protecting it.
Which is not true.
No?
This is the common knowledge of saying that they are less resilient because of, for example, like disasters, like drought. No, because in regenerative agriculture, in organic
that's
food,
regenerative.
Yeah. So I should say here, you're right. I should say here, organic food produced in the regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, because it's something that we talk in my consumers group about dry cultivation. So that would mean like having crops that you don't have to water, like that in this season and in that local context that they're going to grow themselves, like wheat in Poland. Like you don't have to go spraying it with water like your garden every evening because you planted flowers from another place.
Exactly. Same in Ukraine.
And I think the human labor, right? Like
Less okay. So then again, exactly, what about technology? So we're talking no tile, but like you have the choice of like trying to introduce a new technology, or I mean there are a lot of fans of those and trying to introduce like some new knowledge, and then you have also those who say like no, just in order to be able to like grow sustainably, we just need to go back to like permaculturing, and the less technology the better. Long. It's just like maybe those questions just to think about, and
Thank you very much, Sola.